Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to talk to you guys about something that's going to be slightly different than what I normally talk about when it comes to recommendations for people's diet for gaining muscle, because this is for a different demographic, and this is actually a demographic I fall into. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing and let's get to this. Now this video, like I said earlier, is going to be a bit nuanced, and the reason for that is because when you try to talk about topics like this, people will tend to take things you say out of context. A lot of people just are not intelligent enough to grasp certain concepts. And so we're going to do the best we can here. And I know most of you will follow along just fine because the majority of people out there listening are reasonably intelligent people. But you are going to get some people who are going to misunderstand this. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, step back and look at it in context. Don't listen to one-liners in here and not look at it in the context. Because historically, I try to tell people that when we're talking just biologically, from a muscle gain perspective, you don't need anywhere near as much protein as most people think you do. And that if anything, excessive protein is going to cause a problem for very active people who are undereaters. In other words, if you've never been morbidly obese at any point in your life, consuming very, very large amounts of protein is probably not going to be a good idea. In other words, if you were 5'11" and 155 pounds and you started lifting and you were sedentary and were able to keep a body weight under 200 pounds without doing any exercise, this is not for you. You're one of those people who needs to eat the minimum protein. And that's going to be something like 1 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. So in other words, if you weigh 100 kilos, that's 220. We're talking about 100 to 160 grams of protein. And I would say for most of them, eat about 150 grams of protein. And the reason for that is because protein is satiating. Protein has a high thermic effect. Protein will make it hard for you to eat enough to gain weight, especially if you're taking my advice, you're training either stuff like upper, lower, 4-day-a-week splits or 3-day-a-week full body routines with a fair amount of volume and a lot of big compound exercises, and you're doing cardio and conditioning work, it's going to be a problem for you. If you try to consume 300 grams of protein doing that and you were able to maintain 155 or 160 pound body weight years ago and didn't get fat, that's going to be a problem because it's going to fill you up. You're going to struggle to even maintain your body weight. On the other hand, you have a different demographic of people, and it seems like a lot of the products out there are geared towards that first group of people, the skinny hard gainer. Whereas in the reality is a whole lot of us, like a third of the population, at least in America, we're prone to obesity. And when I say prone to obesity, when we talk about genetic predisposition towards obesity, we're talking about people who overeat. We're the people who we can't eat just the one chip. We eat the whole bag. We don't just take a pizza and eat one slice. We'll eat half the pizza before anyone else gets to it, okay? Those of us who are prone to overeating. And for us, the strategies are a little different, particularly when we're sitting at a higher body fat. And I mean higher, I don't mean obese body fat. I mean higher than what a lot of the skinny guys maintain. The guys who walk around at 12 or 13% body fat year round, those guys have different needs than people who struggle to stay at 18 or 19 without drifting back up into the 20s. For those of us in those sort of categories, bulking just doesn't work very well. I mean, I'm in that category. Bulking never ends well. I can accidentally bulk and gain 10 pounds just by not paying attention to what I'm doing, and even if I was trying to cut. If I just lose track of what's going on, I'll just drift right back up. I'll gain 10 pounds in no time. While eating bro fruits too, while eating brown rice every day. And broccoli and chicken. So the thing is, for those of us who want a recomposition, which is probably better for that, if you're at 19-20% body fat and you're a strength athlete or a fairly serious lifter, recomposition is probably a good idea at that point. Meaning we have enough body fat that we can gain muscle while still losing body fat slowly. It's not difficult to gain. It's the skinny guy who's going to have to usually gain more body fat to get bigger. But someone who's above 15 to 16% body fat, you should be able to recomposition. Recompositioning is possible if diet can be kept on point. And one of the things that we need to talk about there is eating larger amounts of protein, and not because it helps gain more muscle. It's that it will allow you to, hold on to muscle better on days where you end up under eating, and it'll blunt fat gain to some extent on days that you overeat. And the reason for that, we start looking at some of the studies. There have been some studies done on people who work out, people who lift weights, who they do protein overfeeding, meaning they split them into two groups. They find their maintenance calories, and they have these people eat maintenance and add a lot of protein. And it's stuff where people are adding like 500 extra calories of protein every day above their maintenance, and then following pretty much a meal plan. And what they found is that the people who added 500 calories of protein a day, their body composition didn't end up different from the people at maintenance. Some of them gained a little bit of extra muscle, but they didn't gain body fat. And it was speculated that what ended up happening, yeah, they struggled to eat more, obviously, because, again, protein is very satiating. When you add a bunch of extra protein to your diet, you're going to be fuller. But what they noted was that, number one, we got the thermic effect of the protein. That ended up burning extra calories every day. Number two, because, again, the energy turnover involved with protein and your body not being able to convert protein into fat or even carbs in any reasonable amount, what they found is that these people moved more. That was part of the hypothesis they've looked at in these studies, where the people didn't really gain weight. Not, at least not appreciable amounts. Some of them gained small amounts. But again, if you add an extra 500 calories to your diet every day, you would expect to gain a pound a week. These were people who gained like a pound in a month or less, is usually the way these studies have gone down. And again, you tend to move more. So you have the thermic effect, and then you have the NEAT effect. So again, it's non-exercise induced thermogenesis, just from moving more, because your body just has an extra fuel source to deal with it. It can't store as fat, so you just tend to be more active to accommodate this. And the interesting thing there is that this is a viable strategy, because those of us who are prone to overeating, even doing large amounts of activity, the extra protein intake will allow us to create a calorie surplus that ends up not being a calorie surplus on some days. Meaning we won't necessarily do that every day, but if we shoot for a very large amount of protein, we can end up in a situation to where the additional thermic effect, the additional NEAT, and the extra satiety ends up keeping our calories closer to maintenance through the week. It's easier to maintain maintenance because your energy turnover is going to go up and your appetite is going to go down. And yeah, in some cases that might cause some weight loss, but what do we know about weight loss? And if protein intake is above your needs, if your protein intake goes really, really high, and even Eric Helms found that in his studies, it tends to preserve muscle mass. So you're going to tend to not lose muscle on the days where you undereat. So again, it'll let you get away with staggering days a little bit, where some days are a surplus, some days are a deficit. It'll balance out in the end, and generally, if you do it correctly, you'll end up recompositioning if you're on a good training program, at least potentially. And I'm not breaking down a full breakdown of this here, but basically just looking at the idea of, for those of us who need to recomposition a bit, who still want to gain strength, we still want to gain a little muscle, but we know we have a little extra body fat that we do need to trim off, upping your protein intake is actually a good idea. Now, here's the caveat there. Here's what I've always said in the past. We don't know that ultra high protein intakes are safe. We can speculate that they are. We don't know that they are. They do carry a potential risk, at least a potential risk of kidney issues and everything else. Again, hypothetically. But I guess the argument could be made that if you're carrying extra body weight because you're carrying a lot of muscle and you are carrying extra body fat, trimming off that extra 5 or 6 pounds of body fat in the long term, or 10 pounds of body fat, could probably be a better for your overall health markers, meaning whatever negative health effects you might get hypothetically from the ultra high protein are very probably going to be offset by the other host of health markers and overall health that you're going to create by losing the extra body fat. So at the end of the day, it's probably not going to be as bad as people are making it out to be, because we know obesity kills. And that's the thing. A lot of us carry a lot of body weight. Those of us who lift hard, strength athletes, everyone else, we carry extra body weight. All right, we carry extra body weight, and that extra body weight isn't always healthy, even in the form of muscle. And when you start combining surplus fat on top of that, in the long term, that's just really not an ideal situation for health. So if we've got to compare the potential health negatives of surplus protein for a few months or 6 months out of the year that might be pushing the limit, that might be putting a slight strain on your kidneys and everything else, we also have to factor that against the extra pounds of body fat that we probably need to lose that are putting a strain on our heart, our liver, everything else. So at the end of the day, you're probably better off in the long term doing that if that's what it takes, just to trim a little bit of the extra fluff off. And again, by doing it this way, if your training is on point, you're staying within your maximum recoverable volume, you're following good training programming, keeping your cardio and everything else up, overall you should be able to improve performance. If you're above about 16% body fat as a weightlifting male, you should be able to gain a little bit of muscle while you're losing body fat and recomposition. It should be doable if everything is on point, and just increasing your protein intake can be a viable tool to help you with that. And again, I want to reiterate, this is for people in my demographic. If you're the skinny hard gainer, you have no business trying to eat 300 or 350 grams of protein a day. It's not going to work very well for you. You need to be eating 150 grams of protein a day and be slamming down carbs and then adding fat to your diet to make gains at that point. But for those of us who are on the other end of the spectrum, in which we carry a little extra body fat, we already have our calorie surplus, it's already there, we're wearing it, we can get away with doing stuff like this. We can recomposition without needing to bulk. Again, as long as we're careful with our training, we train hard, we give ourselves proper recovery and everything else. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.